much for attending today. I really appreciate the interest and enthusiasm. I'm Chris Daniel. I'm Faculty PD Manager for the Instructional Design Center at eCampus. Let me go ahead and also share the screen. Today I'm talking about cheating in the shadow of GPT-3. Quick, I guess it's an agenda. I really want you all to participate as much as you feel comfortable. Interrupt me, blurt things out, especially if we have computer science folks in the course. I'm a prosumer and always have been, probably always will be. So I'm approaching things as a user with, sometimes a little bit more background, but not too much. So please interrupt me or correct any inconsistencies and inaccuracies. So what is it? What's the situation right now? And also I want to talk about at least one perspective that might explain why students cheat. It helps me when I think about my instruction in the master's in IDLT here on campus. It's a program I teach in. And, what are some specific strategies relative to the types of cheating ChatGPT might facilitate that could help? Please talk and chat at will. And also, acknowledgement to Matt Pianalto, Laura Newhart, Gene Kleppinger, and all the folks that participated in the philosophy panel on this subject last week. It gave me a lot of insight, and it was really good to hear from you all. And typically I find when I hear more from faculty, the better sessions like these are. So let's get started. First of all, you should try ChatGPT. If you go to chat.openai.com, create an account. It's going to be very busy. I didn't even try to connect to it today because oftentimes during business hours, it's very busy. But the very first thing I did, and I don't mind letting you all know that I'm an idiot because I just sort of feel like that. I asked it to write a sonnet defending Nicolas Cage as an actor. And I don't know why. I was watching TV, but it churned it out. And we could read that together, but that probably is a little boring. But then I asked it, will it iambic? And it gave it to me in iambic pentameter, I guess. I didn't really check it, and I forgot how to count all that stuff anyway. But one thing it did was it used Doth a whole lot, which was interesting. So what is this technology? ChatGPT, the GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And that's a mouthful of words. Let's realize that it's not really new. GPT itself was created by the folks in OpenAI in 2018. And also artificial intelligence, or these complex algorithms, and they've been around since the 80s or even before. Carnegie Mellon, their nav lab started the first driving car in the 1980s. And so anybody that's interested in that or has knowledge and background about that, please speak up. But this idea that computers can make complex decisions is not really new. But this particular technology uses that complicated computer algorithm, that set of rules, to predict the next word that it will generate based on words that were input, but words that preceded its original, its prior output. And the term transformer relates to the way in which the program can look at different parts of a given text at the same time to arrive at a more natural language output. And it establishes rules for that output. And it functions within a text chat framework. That's the really critical piece for me. That's the piece where we will stand to gain more than we lose by the advent of this technology. Any questions about that? Or does anybody, and I'm not sure I've got answers, but does anybody want to add to that? Cindy Judd from the library made a lot of really great observations because she's having to deal with this in vivo. Like, students are coming to her, asking questions and interacting with this thing already. So you all are already using this and feeling some of the brunt of it. Please.
Quick question, Chris, if that's okay.
Of course.
So, and you may get to this later on in the presentation. So if I've jumped a little bit on the topic, I apologize. But
Yeah.
I've seen the NPR article where is it maybe a Princeton student has created something where you can check it, verify if something is written by ChatGPT. Will you
Yes.
touch on that at all, or has anybody used that? That was going to be my question.
Have used it, will touch on it. Others on campus have already used it too. It's called GPT-0.
Yes.
Currently, it's in kind of a public, I don't like to say beta, but it's in a public offering where people can look at it. I found it to be, it will give some false negatives for me. It gave me a few false negatives. And when I would manipulate it, they've improved it since last week, where it gives you a line by line analysis. So if somebody uses a couple of sentences for that have been AI generated, it can train on that. Anyway, who wants to give their experience about it?
Chris, I was actually working with this yesterday, and I took a homework set that had a bunch of short answer questions, and I would ask ChatGPT the question, get its result, and plug it into GPT-0. And more often than not, it said it was written by a human. So to me, the GPT-0 is inadequate, at least for the kinds of questions, short answer responses that I was looking for. So I don't know if just the ChatGPT software is getting better, faster, and it's outpacing the detection system. But that's been my experience just in the last couple of days of doing some good checking.
Thank you. Thank you for that. CopyLeaks also has a free tool. I've got links to that in this presentation, which I shared initially. Let me make sure it's shared again in case you didn't see it. But the CopyLeaks has a free tool they want people to look at to further investigate their myriad services.
And Chris, I would say too, I would suggest for people, especially that are interested in looking at GPT-0, there are, and there's a ton of these groups on Facebook and I'm sure other places, but there is a GPT-0 educators group on Facebook that has been sharing. A lot of educators have been sharing their experiences. And so if that's something people are interested in, yeah, GPT-0 educators, I'll put that in the chat, might be a group. And I think it's a mix of both like K-12 and, mostly high school teachers, I think, and college. I think it's a mix of both, but it has been interesting to see, what other people are saying and experiencing. And also, I think that was the group where they have people who have been finding the workarounds, to sort of quote unquote cheat the system as if it's not already, maybe if they're already cheating it, let's cheat it a little more. I don't know. I'm not necessarily speaking against the whole cheating or whatever thing, but it's interesting to hear from people like us who are actually working with this already. And so it might be worth people looking into.
Wonderful. Also, that's a great, thanks for pasting that in the chat. Gene Kleppinger also mentioned in the philosophy department panel that the Anthology Corporation, the owners of Blackboard, have user communities dedicated to various topics. I don't know the URL right off the tip of my tongue, but that exists too. And you can create an Anthology account and log in and participate in those discussions. And I'm sure they'll reveal many more things that even folks here on campus who are pretty sharp and on it, haven't yet discovered.
And Chris, I would just say that GPT-0 is going to be effective for the next 5 seconds. And then this is really an arms race, and people are going to figure out ways to get around it no matter what. And also GPT-4 is coming out. I don't know. No one knows when exactly, but there's been rumors about it, but it's going to come out, and then GPT-5 and 6 and who knows. And so, I don't think that GPT-0 or whatever comes after it is going to be a lasting solution. I don't think we should really hope that there's going to be a way to reliably detect AI output, because it's just going to have a best used by date on it, no matter what it is, and that's going to come and go. And so all these cheater detection, safe assignment, and all these things have problems of their own. Most importantly, I think that they are easy to get around, as Cindy was saying. So I wish that GPT-0 was going to be, or something like it was going to be, the solution, but I don't think it is, or at least not for very long.
And I totally thank you for that. I totally agree. And with every technological advancement or way to game the system or abjectly cheat, we found things that try to offer some protection, and then there's always the answer. It's almost like that Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy cartoon. One day the one spy wins and the other one wins, and it just keeps on going. And so totally agree with that. And even some of the more advanced services like copy leaks what they're trying to get at is ways to authenticate a user's or student's own writing style. And there are out of the box technologies that do that. Love Spy versus Spy too. And so it's an arms race. And so I hope I propose, and we already know some of the human ways to kind of serve as an antidote for some of this stuff. Who else wants to talk?
Chris, I have a question.
Yes.
I wonder if you could just touch on I've read some recent articles in like the Times and NPR of professors who are actually embracing ChatGPT. I wonder what your thoughts are there.
I'd love to hear from the audience. I think so my last bullet point, it functions within a text chat framework. I'll just give one example. When I was in my doctoral program writing dissertation, I'd turn to my wife sometimes and say, "Hey, honey, I just read this really interesting article on, the debunking of learning styles or efficiency in online learning." And she'd be like, "That's nice, honey. Can we talk about something that's, really interesting?" Sometimes we need the ability to have sort of a conversation or a dialogue about things that we just can't. I can't find another person who's read that book. I can't find another person that's had the same thoughts. Surely that person exists, but it's another way to I can have a sort of conversation with this chat bot and get some information back. Sure, it's going to be surface, but it's one way for me to think about things. Also, I'll show another slide. Amazon has begged their tech workers not to use ChatGPT to analyze their code snippets for work that they're currently doing, because it makes the company more vulnerable, and also they're not trying to pay people to use AI to write code. So there's going to be a dialogue process that I think will make us better than we currently are at whatever it is that we're doing. And I think that's the big promise of this technology. It's going to be assistive. I'm sure that, and so Cindy's got something good in the chat. There's some people that you can check out online that are active and already talking about this. So that's great. What does it seem to do reasonably well? I'm sure there's all kinds of opinion on this, and I really want to hear your opinion. It's very good at surface, based on my experience, based on what I hear other people say. You want 5 quick paragraphs on Abraham Lincoln, it'll give it to you. You want, you want the difference between Chicago and New York style pizza, it'll give that to you. But it's not going to go into any great depth at this time. It's dialogic. The fact that, I can have a sort of dialogue with this thing, and based on the information, the data that it's trained on, it will give me back some reasonable facsimile of thought. It creates basic to intermediate computer code generation, and it will also analyze code. In fact, Amazon techs are using it, could be using it as a code assistant, and Amazon Incorporated is not happy about that. And there's a link there in the, if you want to peruse that article. And they have a tendency right now, the OpenAI version of this, not a fork version or a dark web, if you will, version, will not return illegal, unethical, or immoral information. So if you ask how to do something bad, and I don't even bring up an idea, it generally will not allow that. it will not return any useful information toward that end. Now, I bet some of you have had ways around that. Who wants to talk?
Chris, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned something about, Abraham Lincoln, and if you asked the software to write about Abraham Lincoln, it could probably do a pretty good job because Abraham Lincoln is famous. He's in the literature. Would it just, if you had a person who was less known, is it just going to make things up?
It could. I'm going to show you some examples about it making some stuff up here in just a second.
Okay.
But yeah, that the more specialized the knowledge is. In fact, I think one of the secrets is if you ask students to return information in essays or exams directly related to your specific readings or the activities in your class, this technology right now is going to have a big problem with that. That's an opinion, but I feel strongly about that opinion. Let me show you a couple things.
Well,
So,
Chris, let me give you an example. I'm teaching an honors course, psychology of acting, and that course doesn't exist anywhere, right? I mean, this is not a course. I asked it to write a syllabus for that course, and first of all, it knew what a syllabus was. It had all the sections of a syllabus, and then it gave me ideas or topics for that class that were really pretty good. Most I had thought about, but some I hadn't. So, it's not like it doesn't really access like Wikipedia, or it's not like it's reading information from the internet and saying, okay, so, here's all these things about Abraham Lincoln, and so I'm going to pull from those. Again, it works in a very strange way. It just predicts what the next word it should be based on this giant data set out there it has. And so it's weird that it doesn't really know anything. It just can predict what words should come next. And so that's a really cool strength of it, but it's also a huge weakness. So it's hard for me to get my head around really how it works and what it can or cannot do, but it was able to come up with a reasonable answer to that question I asked it, where the answer doesn't really exist out there anywhere that it could, appeal to or get the information from. It put together a bunch of information from different places. Somehow it came up with something reasonable.
and thank you so much for that. Did you find that enhanced or caused you to reflect in a different way, in a more productive way than you otherwise would have?
Absolutely. No, I mean, like I said, there were some topics in the course objectives, which of course it had a section called course objectives because it was a syllabus. And some of them were, really good. Now, I actually asked it to give me some readings. No, it gave me something, but they were not, I can't remember if they were false, like just made up things, or if they weren't good or something, but they weren't things I recognized, at least. So.
Good. Who else wants to talk?
I have a quick question, actually. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Angela. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Yeah. In terms of when you have, say you're predicting or you're taking a look and saying that possibly there could be an academic integrity issue, and you have the student's paper, in terms of downloading and uploading it to GPT-0, for example, is there any kind of violation of faculty doing that in terms of intellectual property if you do that, if you suspect it? Because I know with Safe Assign, when the student agrees that it'll be uploaded to the global system, or that it's okay to run it through the software, is there any sort of, because it's outside of the platform, is there any concerns about that?
I don't have that answer. Library, does that come up?
The thing is that the whole intellectual property thing is one of the top issues when it comes to talking about ChatGPT, because, in our panel, in the philosophy panel that Chris referred to earlier, that we had panel discussion, one of the students that was in there was talking about putting his own paper into ChatGPT, and I think getting some feedback on it, and so the thing is, the more we put into it, the quote unquote smarter it becomes. And the line is, I don't even know that it's fuzzy, if there even is a fuzzy version of a line when it comes to this, because people are feeding articles into it and asking for summaries. People are feeding, you know, a chapter or a section of a book in, you know, copying and pasting that text and feeding it in there, asking it to, you know, provide, again, an overview or an outline. So people are feeding into this, and there's really, I don't think there's any policy out there. I think right now it's a matter of us trying to determine if that's ethical or not. And it is just so gray right now. It really is, because, but the thing is, what we're putting into it is making it quote unquote smarter. And so if students are putting their own work into it, again, faculty are putting things into it, you know, other researchers are putting things, like, we're all putting our stuff in it. And I wish there was something, like, literally this is changing every single day. That's not an exaggeration.
That's right.
It's just so hard to know.
And while my understanding is it's not training, the GPT-3 is not training on input right now, but they are taking the input that we give it right now, and they are using that to evaluate the efficacy and accuracy of that service. So, and regardless, it is capturing whatever you put in there, and GPT-0 is as well. And so it is a huge, I mean, in my mind, it's a big question mark about, you know, what are the ramifications?
Yeah, thank you for the clarity on that. I was just curious in terms of what if there was a faculty policy on it, if there was anything, if we've gotten to that level in terms of what we can actually do to try to reduce things from happening. But I'm noticing and I'm hearing that the more you feed it, the more it learns. And
Well,
so that's a concern. I mean, it would be feedback wise, I think even if the developers of it had some sort of watermark detection or some sort of watermark in it so we could be able to detect it a little clearer
yeah.
would be helpful. But you know, I'm not trained in all of that. I wouldn't understand if that's even a possibility. So yeah, it's just concerning. And you know, but it can be very tempting, I think, for our students that are, you know, looking for ideas, perhaps a quick way of generating a paper. And my concern is that not only does that, and Cindy, you brought up the ethical concerns, you know, the dispositional piece of it, and some of the things that we're trying to support students with is you know, the ethical consideration of doing that and the academic integrity. Because essentially we're training them. We're also, our goal is to train them so they can be developing things like self-efficacy and learning and developing those skills. So if they're just gaining it from the AI, then whether or not we are fulfilling that goal in the ultimate. So just my 2 cents.
No, great. I'm glad to hear that. And Alex and Carolyn both had a good sort of follow-up or additional comments on that. Alex, would you like to speak, or should I just say that for you? Is GPT plagiarism in and of itself? I mean, it is, in that it's trained on this, you know, huge massive text, but the actual text output is not, I think, technically plagiarized.
And there's a lot, you know, there's some really interesting articles out there. Also, I think one of the ones had to do with the publication called Nature. But there's some really interesting articles about whether or not you cite ChatGPT and, you know, ChatGPT or an AI. If you use an image from an AI program, if you use text, whether you give credit to that or not. And on the one hand, it kind of seems like, well, if you're using it and you give it credit, well, that's sort of, you know, that's the ethical thing to do, because technically you're giving credit to where you got the information in your paper or whatever it is you're doing. But on the other hand, you have this idea of, well, it's AI. There's no, like, do you really have to cite it? Question mark. You know, like I kind of lean as the librarian and the educator in me. I want to say, of course we cite it, because give them credit. And that way we're at least trying to give a good faith effort into what we're doing. But yeah, there's a whole, but then again, like Matt just said, we don't cite spell checkers. We don't cite Grammarly. We don't, you know, like, what are we? Yeah, so there's a lot of gray in that too. I don't know.
Jenny. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm coming at it because I'm working on developing a plagiarism unit within first year seminar and to address it. And I think since the technology is changing so rapidly, we need to figure out at some point, if instead of starting with the assumption that students will cheat if we let them, what if we start with the assumption that students can be educated on the ethics of plagiarism? First, we're going to have to decide, is this unethical? And what aspects, and if it's only parts of it are unethical, what parts are problematic and what parts are not? And unless we develop clear standards, there's only so mad or so punitive we can be with students. So I guess my big question is, what part of it is okay to use? And like idea generating, syllabus generating, thinking about sources you wouldn't have done otherwise. And what part of it is lying?
Yeah, I mean, we had a similar conversation with the advent of Wikipedia, I believe. I'm not you and me, but I mean, I heard it all through higher ed. You know, what are we going to do about this, Wikipedia thing? And where students were copying and pasting abjectly, of course, that's problematic. And this is completely different, in its own way, a different animal. But the essential problems are kind of the same, I think. And so, my thought. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we taught students and we developed language, don't copy and paste.
Yep.
I mean, we told them don't copy and paste. Somewhere in here, it became part of an understanding. You can't do that. Yep. And so we had a standard.
Yep.
So, yeah, and yes, Carolyn is right. We can prove very easy that that they copied and pasted.
That's true. But at the same time, Wikipedia got a whole lot better in 5 years or so. And I think there's less propensity for students to do that now, though I may be just, wrong.
I'm looking at the article that Matt linked in the chat on these very questions. I think the heart of it is that we need to develop standards and we communicate those standards. And I actually think the standards question needs to the next step. And yes, students will cheat and they will violate the standard, but first of all, we have something that we can clearly punish if we need to punish. But the reality is most of them don't cheat.
That's right.
The cheaters are the exception and the problem. And we have research that shows if we tell them that don't do this, it's bad, they're significantly less likely to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. You're validating some of my slides here in a second. So thank you for that. Brittany.
So this is kind of a technical question for you, Chris, and we don't have to get into the weeds of it, but I think that the future of education has some interesting opportunities with blockchain technology. And I wonder if there are any conversations being had about the opportunity for blockchain to kind of provide, somebody had mentioned earlier, like a watermark type thing.
Yeah, I'm no expert on that, but the blockchain is this sense of a decentralized tracking process for. They typically talk about it with money. So, are you suggesting that if OpenAI would create a blockchain token for every piece of output, that this could be traced to a particular time and date, and and user session? How are you suggesting we leverage that tech?
I don't have any suggestions. I'm thinking out loud at this point.
Yeah.
But I just think about conversations that I've had in the past, and in grad school, about education is really moving towards this blockchain of, you take this course and that gets put onto your record, and it's kind of a resume, if you will. And I wonder if it would be possible to include something like that in terms of AI. But I don't have any questions or answers, but I was just wondering if you had any information or thoughts on that.
I've done no reading on that, except I imagine you could create a paper or document or some product, and through some technology give that a authentication stamp that says, hey, this was written on this computer, and the characters are actually input by the student. And I think that we're going back to Matt's point about it being an arms race, that people will invent a way to hack around that. And to Jenny's point, that there's a human side to this. Most people are honest. Most students come to us wanting to learn, to further their goals and aspirations, and they believe, even if it's just a little bit, that higher education is the key to that. And what we need to do is make them help them to understand how they're doing it. We're doing all this for their benefit. I mean, if you're here and you're not for student benefit, you're nuts. But I think, and so I think the human answer humanity will win out. And I've got a book that I hope will maybe help us prove that a little bit. But I want to explore that. So thank you for that. Any ideas about that? This has gone much better than I ever thought it would, because you all are talking and getting me enthusiastic. So anyway, I asked.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go.
I just have a quick comment, and yeah, thank you. And yeah, the watermark idea, I don't know if people are having conversations with the developers of it to see if that's a possibility. Again, with Safe Assign, I don't know in terms of our contract if whether or not that's going to be something incorporated. I agree with Jenny. I mean, our students are, in terms of that's the exception, that student, or very limited in terms of students doing it. I think my concern, particularly with the students that we're teaching, is the self-efficacy component of it, that our students have to be able to get out into the field as clinicians and to be able to support the community and be able to think on their feet and to be able to do a specific task and know the steps and develop the steps through this learning. And that's my concern, is that if they generate that through AI, if whether or not that's going to evolve the ability to be able to actually follow through with what they need to follow through with. So although I could see benefits too,
Yeah.
I don't know, it kind of gives me visions of what's that movie with Matthew McConaughey, Interstellar,
Yeah.
where there's a situation and you need support and you need help, and so there could potentially be benefits, but at the same time, I think that we have to obviously recognize the limitations, and I agree that it's going to be a challenge because things are evolving so quickly. So anyway, I find this extremely helpful, and thank you, Matthew, as well, for sharing the articles as well as the points as well in terms of the policies for campus policies too. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for all that. And one of the things you said prompted me to recall a conversation Cindy Tran and I had before the session about the importance of professionalism and competence, and that you can't, like, even if this AI gets you through some things, it can't replace, that content knowledge and the work that you have to do to get where you're going. And Cindy, would you mind talking about that a little bit if you're listening, Cindy Tran?
Yeah. So I teach out of the forensic science program. And so, personal integrity is one of those like key things when our students get out into the workforce. And if they have, any kind of integrity issue in one case that they do, every case that they have ever worked on in their career will be called into question, and it basically kills a career real fast. So I've done a lot of work after I had some academic integrity issues of students copying off each other a couple of years ago. I mean, I have lots of conversation about academic integrity and what it means and what do these scenarios look like. And but I think for me, it's kind of understanding why my students are led to that point. And for me, approaching ChatGPT, it's okay, why are they going to use this? What are the situations that they find themselves in? They're doing their homework last minute. They don't have time to sit there and think through it. They don't want to research the topic to find the answer or really have that kind of personal struggle for it. So to me, it's to have these conversations with them to say, you know, if you're using it, here's what you're missing that you actually need when you get out. And if I'm telling you don't use it and you are, now you have an integrity issue that you're willing to cheat a little here. What happens when you're in the workforce and it becomes a career killer to do it once? So I think, you know, in my field, at least, I have the leverage of being like, it will kill your career if you do it once. But to have those kind of conversations about and consider why. I know in faculty innovator discussion last week, and Laurel can chime in with this as well. I can't remember who it was that mentioned it. Cindy Judd, you were there too, but about that students now are often cheating to help each other and say, I'm going to help you. I don't see it as cheating. I've just shared my answer with you because I'm helping you. And there's that component as well. And I don't, you know, ChatGPT isn't necessarily about helping each other, but it's about, I need help. Where do I get that help from? And instead of trying to own up to it and come to an instructor, they're turning to other sources. And I think that's where ChatGPT is coming in, at least, or going to come in terms of my courses.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. So I got it to write a Python script that I presume will work. And it explained, I wanted to search for cheap airfare, which I know I can just do by hand. But I thought, well, can this give me computer code that makes that happen? Not only does it give me something that I think will work, I'm not a super great computer programmer, pretty lousy, probably the worst. But it explains what this is, what library inside of Python I would need to use and invoke. And it gives me a little mini tutorial, which I thought was pretty interesting. And there are also, CopyLeaks has a program that presumably evaluates computer code, so that if a student submits code that is not theirs, it can catch that. So I just thought I would share that strength that I think I'm seeing with this product. Just today, Empathy's new tool uses AI to generate obituaries, and it's not half bad. So, you know, here's where we're going with this stuff. It can do. I've seen some really great obituaries, and I've seen some pretty mediocre ones. So I'm not sure what that says, but it can generate this surface type of content. What are some of the deficits? Facts. It's real weird and iffy on facts sometimes. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. Deep connections to concepts or items doesn't do a great job with that. I think, and I'm no linguist, so I don't know, but I feel like when I ask it to write something, it always gives me a similar kind of a writing style that doesn't feel like somebody I know who writes. Let's just put it like that. It tends to return this pretty verbose style a lot. Maybe we could tell it not to be so verbose, and it would obey that. It's lousy at making judgments. Don't ask it to make a value judgment or tell you, which is superior or which is more useful. It has a real problem with that. And again, page length. It does not give you pages and pages, although you can cobble that together. It doesn't accept, I don't know how many pages exactly, but I tried to feed it one of my dissertation chapters, and it said, whoa, buddy, that's too much. So I think there's a pretty small page limit too. So one thing I did, I know this is politically charged, forgive me, but I was just, what are the two most diametrically opposed people I could think of? And I asked it, what do Barack and Donald Trump have in common? And it said both are attorneys, and that's not true. Both are known for their public speaking skills. I'm not sure that's true, although I think that's probably a matter of opinion. But it gave me surface. Both have written books. I think I think one's books have been largely ghostwritten. Maybe both authors have had their book ghostwritten. I'm not sure how that works at the presidential level. So it gave me some not truths. What are the connections between Kentucky and California? It just gave some, a 100-page script. Matt said it would give a 100-page script back. That's pretty amazing. There you go. Trump hasn't written a book on his presidency yet. I asked it to make connections between Kentucky and California. It just gave me a bunch of odd sort of non-comparisons. Kentucky and California are located in different regions. Well, I asked for a comparison. I didn't ask for that. Jim.
Is this software, it's intelligent enough to, if you told it to write at a grade level of a grade schooler, a high schooler, or a beginning college writer, could it give an answer, or could it give a product that looks age appropriate?
Yeah, it will reduce it will try to make that happen. But it's largely a difference of degrees. Like if I ask it to write like a high schooler, I still feel like it doesn't ring true exactly. Cindy said she's had experience with it writing in voices.
Not like the ones in your head, but but yeah, you can tell it. And actually the more specific you tell it, the better its response. And I'm putting better in quotation marks, but yeah, you write it as if you're talking. Yeah, you can really give it all kinds of customized, I'm going to say quote unquote voices. That's for lack of a better word, Jim. And
so it's not you probably already said this, but it's not grabbing info from Wikipedia, from the web, and splicing it together necessarily so you would catch it on safe assignments.
That's right. It's safe assignment, in my opinion, is not particularly strong at detecting plagiarism. I mean, if somebody is abjectly copied, it will do a decent job of returning that. But no, it's predicting. It's predicting based on the last words that it wrote and based on your input what the next words should be. And that's the difference. And that's why you can ask it to regenerate. Like there's a regenerate button on this. I didn't show it, but you could hit regenerate and it'll give you somewhat of a different output. Sometimes it's very different, sometimes not so different. So not a great job of comparing Kentucky or making connections between Kentucky and California. I mean, it could have said people who are born in Kentucky who live in California. There are all different ways you could have sliced that pie, as it were, but it just gave some non-comparisons. What are the connections between a dog and an American bat? You have to question the voices in my head, right, Cindy? Both are mammals, good. Both are found in a variety of environments and climates throughout the United States. Well, okay. Both have been the subject of scientific research and study. Okay. Both dogs and bats are popular as pets. Popular as pets. So, sure, most students aren't going to fall for that, but some will get complicated and they will have really weird and obvious inaccuracies in the output, and they'll try to use that.
They're going to see that and think, wait, so I can have an emotional support bat? Is that what you're doing?
Right? That would be fraught. What are disadvantages to being tall? I mean, you could go on and on with these. I didn't particularly, of course, then it says it's important to note that some people don't think that these are disadvantages. So maybe that one's a little better. Then I tried to get it to, I doubled down on getting it to tell me if New York or Chicago pizza was better. And it wouldn't do it. So technology has some answers we've already talked about. We talked about GPT-0 copy leaks program. You can get the presentation and go and see those and test them out. And that copy leaks vendor would love to speak with you. They've been very persistent on campus. There's also stylometry software that's more difficult to use, but presumably if you give these programs, and I've not used them, if you give them legitimate, authenticated student samples of work, over time, they have a good ability to detect whether or not a future submission is within the same style. And this ISIN 2020 article that I've got in my reference list kind of explains how they used it and how they found it to be pretty accurate. But those are three, and these are free like a puppy, though. You download it, but then you have to install libraries, and it seems pretty technical. The average person's not going to have the time or inclination to use these or to train it on every individual student. But I imagine there will be products in the future that would assist with that.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
And thank you, Matthew, for sharing the policies. So, in your opinion, is this something we should be incorporating in with moving forward with our syllabus? Or is this something that we're planning on possibly incorporating in our syllabus for future classes? I thought some of the points used in the policies that Matthew shared looked really good. Is this something we're going to recommend in the future for curriculum development? Just curious.
I know I'm doing it in the class I'm teaching here in just a few weeks, only because I want students, and it's mainly about letting them understand that I don't care if they use the technology, but if they lean on that, then what does that do? So, like for discussion board posts, I would really prefer not to read AI output thoughts, and that bothers me because that means they're not doing the intellectual lifting in terms of the readings, in terms of their own thinking about things. I mean, but using the tool to get ideas or to make discoveries or to just think deeply about the concepts, I like that.
I would say that the policies, again, things are changing so fast. If we decided on a policy at EKU, it would be outdated by fall semester. We have to do it again and then have to do it again. And so I just don't see the utility of trying to adopt a campus-wide policy or even a personal policy that I'm going to have in my classes, because I don't know what it's going to be able to do and not be able to do, for fall semester. So, I think kind of what Chris said, which is, like just having a conversation about what it can do, what it might be good to use it for, bad to use it for, what the benefits are of it. I think that's a better approach. But even that's going to change. I mean, we've been saying a bunch of times today that, oh, look how it's not that great. The output's not that great. GPT-4 is going to be X number of times better than GPT-3. And so our complaints about how it's not very good are going to go away. And it's actually going to be able to produce stuff that is not only as good as our students want it to be, but probably as good as we would want our own work to be. I mean, we've been really focused on students in this panel, which is good. But if you don't think that it's coming for your job, you're mistaken.
Yeah.
It's going to get so good that we're going to have a hard time keeping up with it. And we're going to be facing the same dilemma that our students are facing right now, which is how can I use this, or how should I use this? And if I don't use it, there's going to be someone else who's using it, and they're going to be, I don't know, out competing us, or I'm not sure. So again, it's so frustrating because we just don't know what it's going to do in the future. So there is no long-term planning for this because it's just the great unknown, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. And there are some points I think we can be real sure of, that it's not currently trained on 2023 data, but it will be. That it will be more open to all languages. So even if it could check things in English, somebody could ask it to write something in Russian and then retranslate that using Google Translate and edit. I mean, there's going to be ways around it, to your original point. And that we haven't seen what Amazon and Google have. Supposedly there's an NPR story that I couldn't find, that they have their own answers to this technology. And of course, Microsoft has bought into OpenAI. So, the future will look, in the immediate future will look pretty different. And that's to say nothing of the ethical issue, where when somebody forks this technology and wants to use it for maybe not good or maybe not the best purpose, then people will have access to that, both in terms of, academics and professional life and all that. Many are probably familiar with the fraud triangle. It's fairly old now. And it just sort of states that where there's incentive and pressure, where the rationalization and the attitude meets the opportunity, that fraud is more likely to occur. And so I think that the answer for a lot of this is some human interaction. I'm curious about your thoughts about why you think students cheat. Peterson said that where these attitudes are more prevalent, there's also higher likelihood for cheating. When they see the diploma as just something to get your foot in the door, when the grade is more important than the learning, when everyone's doing it and it isn't hurting anyone. And of course, to Jenny's original point, no, we don't think we're certain that not all students do this. We know that. But when technology replaces knowing facts, when I can make something cool happen, that means, that's better than knowledge. When the entire internet is an open public information, if you can get it on your computer, then it's legit. It's okay. If they're in a subculture that values cheating skills, or if that higher education is purely transactional, he believes those are probably people who will engage in cheating. Cindy says, too much on their plate, struggling with time management, pressure of getting a grade, stress and phone addiction. Time management and convenience, yeah. So some possible antidotes, and I'd like to know your antidotes. Matt's talked about it in the past, but I think really getting students engaged, however we can do that. Lots of different strategies online, anyway, that I know about. I'm sure in face-to-face courses what works for you and your students. For me, a lot of it is facilitating personal connections, not only interpersonal connections, but making the content, getting students to find some way where they can make personal connections, prior knowledge connections to what they're learning currently. That helps. Students really want you as faculty to serve as their mentors and guides to their own goals and aspirations, whether that's a job, whether that's further education. They're looking to you all, and the more that you can fill those roles when those students are really looking, I think that lends itself to higher academic integrity. Demonstrating you can't fake it in the workplace. Thank you, Cindy Tran and Angela, for making that point. You're not going to be able to necessarily do some of this stuff in the same ways as you can when you're taking classes, and purely educating them on what the pitfalls, what the rationale is, why we want them to do this work. It's for them, and utilizing the technology.
That's a really good point, because one of the things that we're training is clinical counselors that are treating people with clinical mental health issues and going out into the field, and one of the things that we also incorporate is not only the policies and procedures at the school, but also the policies and procedures of becoming an ethical clinician in the future. And part of it is things like integrity, decision making, part is all misrepresentation. All of that stuff is incorporated in our code of ethics, and it's a real dance of trying to teach that. But at the same time, I can see, as Matthew had mentioned, we could utilize AI as a way of being a tool, kind of like different tools that we use for assessment as well. It's just a question of how do we use that tool most effectively, and not sort of broaching onto some of the ethical concerns that we have as well as a clinician. So
thank you for that. Yeah, it's good for folks that have either clinical, like you're from particular professions, how just showing them, what, where are the pitfalls, what are the things they need to know if they want to do that job. We're training them now. We're training not only their skills, but they're thinking about these things too. I don't know how many more slides we'll get to, but I want to offer this book that should be in the library because I asked for it 10 years ago because I wanted to read it. It's from William Powers, who I believe wrote for the Washington Post. And what he does is in that era, in the 2011 era, we were worried about preoccupation due to digital devices, problems that came with handheld devices. And what he tried to do is go back through history and talk about some of these major technological advances, things we don't even think about, and how we should, we have a tendency from these technologies, in his opinion, to gain more than we lose from them. So even though there's a period of adjustment, the printing press was one that he mentioned. We tend, as a society, we gain more from these things, but we have to be intentional about when to utilize them and when to break free. I think with handheld devices, and phone addiction, I don't know nothing about those things, but I imagine those are problematic and probably will continue to be. But he believes strongly, we will learn to cope, but we have to give ourselves the reflective time and space. And that's another point that Matt made, is that, this is all coming on pretty fast, and it's hard to plan and make big proclamations when the game could change in just a few months. Somebody talk if you want.
Chris, I would say I love that book. It's a great book, and we had that guy on campus. That was the freshman book back when we used to have freshman books. And he came to campus a couple times, a couple years in a row. Really good, awesome speaker. I think there might be reasons to suspect that recent tech changes like AI and smartphones might be a little different than the ones he talked about in the past. But I think his general point, the point that you made about it is generally correct. We definitely need to be mindful of this. And the other thing that he points out in his book is that all those changes, the printing press and all the rest, did cause significant societal disruption.
Yeah.
I mean, huge changes in society now. Sometimes they, took place over decades or centuries, and it's going to be a lot faster for this. But, so we should expect to have big changes happen because of this tech change. But so change is going to happen, but we hopefully can come out better for it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's all coming so fast. I mean, even though it's not a new technology, I mean, it is only 4 years old. So, that's pretty, compared to the printing press, that's at lightning pace. We've only got about a minute left. Let's just break here, because a lot of what I'm going to offer you is tech stuff. Although, let me just go to the last slide and say that a lot of these other issues, I don't have any good answers for, and I'm really interested in knowing what your answers do. Like, how do we scale? How do we reduce faculty workload in all this? Or can we? That's the killer, I think. If you catch somebody, or even the training aspect of it, why we don't do that. I mean, that just takes extra time. How can we simplify our workflow through some of these problems that we have? How can we verify student identity in these things? Brittany's blockchain idea was perfect. Working with the student conduct office. I've heard that half a dozen times in the last couple of weeks. So anyway, there are these other broader issues. There's a reference list on some of the things that I read in preparing for this. Thanks to the philosophy department for doing this last week. It really helped me. And thanks to you all for chiming in and giving your ideas and your input. Anybody else have anything to say? And if you left me something in chat, I'll find it when we leave here, and I will get back with you. Thank you all. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Cindy, Tran. Really appreciate and others that chimed in. Really appreciate your time and attention and talking with me. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and you can hang out. We'll